Understanding named EIGRP. Some of you may know that the iOS has been going through transition, meaning the iOS, which is what made Cisco famous many moons ago, has been transformed into iOS XE and then iOS XR. Now, when this first happened, I was actually at Cisco Live when the XR release was rolled out, and I took a picture of myself standing next to one of their CRS-1 routers, and I was like, this is going to be awesome. This iOS XR is going to make its way to all of the mainstream Cisco routers because it's a complete rebuild. It's actually built off of a FreeBSD, Linuxy kind of foundation, which makes it a lot more modular instead of the monolithic, meaning kind of all-in-one iOS flavors they've had for years and years and years. I was so excited when that happened. And iOS XR introduces a lot of improvements in the way that you work with the iOS. That was about 8 years ago. And I'm still waiting for iOS XR to come along and replace all the iOS versions. Well, named EIGRP is essentially, I saw it, I go, look at that. It's starting to get there, but essentially it's not iOS XR replacing iOS. It's the look and feel of iOS XR trickling down into the iOS. Let me explain. EIGRP configuration, and by the way, I had to actually go outside of my normal GNS3 test gear and go to one of the routers I have sitting in a data center, which is this guy right here, because it's running a later version of the iOS 15. So that I can demonstrate this feature. When you normally go in and configure EIGRP, you type in router, EIGRP, and an autonomous system number, right? Well, if you're running one of the later and greater flavors of iOS in the 15 versions, I'm running a later version of 15.1. A lot of people have told me 15.2, that's where this really adds all the features, although I've seen it work just fine in 15.1. You have this virtual instance name. The motivation behind this was primarily to save the split. What I mean is when you configure traditional, or what's referred to as classic EIGRP, you put some commands under the router mode, like the network command, like no auto summary, all that kind of thing, if you were to go into that mode. But a lot of the commands actually go under the interface. Like if you're going to do authentication, if you're going to modify the timers and things like that, go under the interface itself. Well, under the named mode, essentially they bring all of that under EIGRP, meaning there's no need to go under the interface anymore. It's all done from one place. That's pretty much it. Now, what you're going to see here as I configure this is the look and feel of iOS XR, which maybe this is where Cisco is going with all of their syntaxes. It's going to go to this updated form, but just remember as I do this, you accomplish the same thing with EIGRP named mode. It's just rather than going under router mode, then under interface mode, it all comes in one place. Well, the first thing I need to do is give it a name. It is case sensitive, so let's just call it CBT, right? I'm now in named mode. Now, when you hit question mark, it's like, wow, not much going on there. That's because just about everything falls under this address family command, saying which flavor of EIGRP you're going to use. You're going to go IPv4 or IPv6 on me. Unicast, multicast, not necessarily whether you're going to send hellos using multicast or unicast, but more so saying this is the kind of address families you're going to do routing for. You can actually enable EIGRP for multicast addresses and advertise them using EIGRP. I'm just going to say normal unicast routing, autonomous system, and we'll say 10. Notice you can also do a virtual router forwarding instance. This is how you can essentially configure virtual routers that have different routing tables all within the same router. More on that later. For now, we're into the autonomous system. That would be the same thing as typing in router EIGRP 10 in the old world. We're now there. From here, you can go in and let's just say we want to enable the network command. So I'll say network, 172.16.0.0. You've got your wildcard mask. So essentially, same kind of thing as we had previously. But now, let's say I want to go into the interfaces. I can do AF interface and go into the interface from here. So let's just say fast Ethernet 0/0. Now, rather than exiting the router config mode, going under the interface and configuring EIGRP commands here, this is where I can do things like the bandwidth. I can do passive interface. I can shut down EIGRP. I can turn off split horizon. I can inject a summary address. All the same stuff that we've been doing with EIGRP under the physical interface, but now we're under the interface configuration mode within the router. I know. I can feel some of you are like, I kind of like the old way because that's how I did. Well, honestly, I do too, but it's just because that's how you and I learned it from the beginning, right? When we first learned EIGRP, it's different. It actually takes a few additional commands. However, we consolidate all of this configuration in one place. Notice, let me go back. Actually, hang on. Go back into the address family. Notice we also have topology base topology, essentially commands that affect the EIGRP topology as a whole. That's where we can go in and do, for instance, no auto summary, do some redistribution commands that again affects the entire routing process. All comes in this topology base. So what's new with name configuration? Nothing. It's just moving a lot of the let me bite my tongue before I get all the angry emails. Yes, there are some new features that are introduced, but primarily this brings the look and feel of EIGRP configuration to make it look more like iOS XR and consolidate all the commands into one location, the routing process. Well, I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.